So, okay, you know who I am. I come here all the time. So, okay. This is the title of the presentation. Blockchain, woke time chain. So this is the blockchain incredible party. Next year we will have the TIP 001 in Odessa because everybody stop using the buzzword blockchain from now. Thank you. So take notes. Everybody stopping using the word blockchain, and we switch to time chain. Okay, so these military helicopters are sent here by Peter Todd, who is very angry about this.
I thought it was the next presidential election.
Sorry, Peter. So Peter's take on this is time chain is a no-full term because it focuses on the wrong thing. What's important is not the timing of transactions, but rather the absence of double spends. To prove that you need a volume for those spends to be defined, and blockchain suggests volume. So Peter is wrong, and now I'm going to tell you why. I know there is a recording, so I can. This whole talk is dedicated to him, so I can send him the video and show him why he is wrong. So how many of you heard about the term time chain before now? Raise your hands. Oh, it's okay. So a lot of very nice surprises for a lot of you here. So first of all, this presentation is about terminology. And tomorrow night, I will have a Bitcoin meetup here. It will be, okay, you cannot really read there, but it's probably like somewhere, sometimes, probably around 6 p.m. Here close. So ask Pavel or ask Anastasia. And I will talk about Bitcoin terminology. I will try to clarify some terms that usually are misused or misinterpreted or misunderstood. For example, Bitcoin himself. There is people going around saying that shitcoins are Bitcoin. So there is a lot of confusion about what Bitcoin actually is. There is a lot of confusion about blockchain, about consensus. I mean, we know that consensus is a scam conference in New York, but it's also a technical term which is misused a lot. Fork, node, sidechain, censorship, and timestamp. So this presentation this morning is somehow connected with this terminological clarification process because I will talk a lot about the word blockchain. What does blockchain actually means and what does a blockchain actually do? So when I have to teach Bitcoin to people, usually clients never come to me for Bitcoin consultancy. They come to me for blockchain consultancy. Then I have to sell them blockchain consult. Basically, I have to scam my clients, starting to talk about blockchain. Then I teach them that the word blockchain is basically meaningless, and what they want is either MySQL or Bitcoin. And so this is the usual thought process in a typical consultancy. But what I try to do is always to postpone the actual interaction with the word blockchain because it's a very confusing term. Basically, people is right now using blockchain as a placeholder for some strange technology you need for do things that you cannot do now. It's used as a placeholder for anything, from digitalization of processes in general, to some degree of decentralization or distribution, to some use of cryptography at some extent, to some game theory with economical incentives. So if you're doing basically anything new, technologically speaking, you are doing blockchain in some capacity. What I try to do is to actually teach people what a blockchain is, going through the typical four W's of the English languages, so where, what, who, and when. And I explained them that the first problem Bitcoin was created to solve was the where problem, so the decentralization problem. I give the typical example of Napster. Napster can be shut down because it's centralized. There is a single server managed by a single company. BitTorrent cannot be shut down because it's decentralized. There is no single point of failure. So we talk about peer-to-peer architecture and free, libre, open source software, which is not blockchain. Many people right now use the term blockchain to indicate everything which is peer-to-peer. But I mean, Git is peer-to-peer, is not a blockchain. BitTorrent is peer-to-peer, is not a blockchain. A lot of stuff is peer-to-peer, not a blockchain. Free open source software, Linux kernel is not a blockchain and it's free open source. So there is a lot of overlap between the use of the term blockchain and the simple reality of peer-to-peer open source systems. Then the problem is that when you distribute BitTorrent, when you decentralize BitTorrent, you don't have to control some kind of scarce economical resource, because files on BitTorrent, anybody can put files on BitTorrent. There is no scarcity requirement. While if you talk about money, it's not nice that everybody can access to the system and permissionlessly start to add economical value to the ledger, because otherwise everybody would create infinite wealth, and the wealth would be inflationed away to nothing. So you need some kind of control of scarcity, and that's the question what. And so you basically introduce the proof of work concept. Proof of work is still not blockchain. Hashcash by Adam Beck in 1996, it used proof of work, but it was not a blockchain in any capacity. And also used the Coinbase inflation schedule, so you have the halving, you have the difficulty adjustment, so the inflation of the value in the Bitcoin register is controlled, but that's not a blockchain itself, it's just a control mechanism in the, let's say, in the issuance of the economical asset. It's still not blockchain. Then there is the question who. So after you issued on the ledger some kind of valuable, some kind of representative of value, who is allowed to change the ledger to transfer it? And that's basically not about blockchain. That's about digital signature, what I call here a witness, or contracts with the script. So there is nothing blockchain about signing something to give somebody else something. eCash in 1990 by David Chaum used a signing mechanism and is not a blockchain. I mean, any kind of connection right now on the internet with HTTPS is using cryptography in order to sign stuff. So this is still not a blockchain. But when we arrive to the last question, which is when is actually my transaction, let's say, final, and so it cannot be double spent? That's the only point in which Satoshi Nakamoto had to introduce something actually new, which is a strange way to put a collection of current transaction inside the commitment of the block, which is used for the issuance. So you create a game theory that makes the structure kind of immutable after a certain amount of time. So basically, the blockchain is actually the answer to the when question. Is only introduced to avoid double spending, and what it can do is basically only avoiding double spending. So the technical meaning of the word blockchain is not this magical fiery dust that you can just put on top of your business problem and magically make it disappear. It's just a very specific thing. Satoshi Nakamoto calls it in the paper basically a distributed timestamping service. We will see now that that terminology is wrong. I'm sorry, Craig, you were wrong when you wrote the paper. It's not exactly, I'm joking, of course. It's not exactly a timestamping service. Timestamping is something else, but we will try to clarify a little bit. So the important thing is that all the Bitcoin stack, technological stack, uses a lot of things that are not the blockchain, and it uses the blockchain only at the final point to avoid double spending, and mainly to answer to a chronological question. Is this transaction final or not? Of course, finality in Bitcoin is never complete, is always statistical, always economically incentivized, but still, after zero confirmation, you cannot trust a Bitcoin transaction because it can be double spent. After 1, maybe. After 5, yes, if there is not a major reorg attack. And after, let's say, 3 years, probably if Bitcoin is going to survive, you can trust the finality of that transaction. So it's the answer to a when problem. What's the problem with the term blockchain? The problem is that it's very generic, it's very empty, it doesn't really represent from a linguistical, terminological point of view the content. It's not very semantically transparent. So people started to use that for random things and basically to create a cargo cult. So you know the cargo cult, right? You are in the jungle, there are the primitives people, this is not very politically correct, there are the differently civilized people living in the jungle. So they see the plane, they see a very powerful jet, they look at the jet, and they see this power. This stuff is flying and make a lot of noise. So they want to recreate this power, and they take a lot of wood and they recreate the shape of the military jet, trying to harness the power of the plane. But that's a cargo cult. That's just wood, and even if they created the same shape, it doesn't do the same things for the same reasons, and it doesn't work in the same way. Blockchain is 99% right now a cargo cult. So people see Bitcoin with some characteristic like immutability, censorship resistant, and they say, okay, if we take this data structure, which is done with some block hashed into some other block, and we transpose this structure into our centralized, completely censorable, and completely mutable business case, then we can finally harvest the power of Bitcoin in our setting. Which is, I don't know if you ever tried to fly on top of a wooden cargo totem, but it doesn't work very much. So the things you can actually use a blockchain for, in a very strict term, in this strict term, I know that if you want to use the term blockchain for whatever, you can do it. I mean, words are just words. So if we decide that blockchain right now only means digital innovation in general, let's go for it. The only thing is that if you use this very, very wise definition of blockchain, you cannot say stuff like blockchain is immutable, or even blockchain is disruptive. Is not. I mean, in this definition, Swift is using a blockchain since the 90s, and everybody's using a blockchain already with Git. So if you use a very broad definition, you have to give up the marketing advantages of saying stuff like immutability, censorship resistance, disruption, new stuff, permissionless, trustless, etc., etc. If you use the strict definition of the word instead, what you can do with a blockchain is basically one, running Bitcoin in order to, just a little part of what you need to run Bitcoin, just in order to avoid double spending. Two, you can run scam coins in a similar way, at least for a while until the market incentives for mining are not supportable anymore. But I guess that for 7 to 10 years you could run scam coins. We are running out of time now, but you still have your chance to run a scam coin, I think. Proof of work based scam coin, maybe for a couple of years. Then you can use open timestamps. So you can leverage the Bitcoin blockchain to take a document, hash it, put the hash on a operator, or even better, on a pay to contract or sign to contract script, so you don't even spam the blockchain. And you can use the Bitcoin blockchain as a proof that some data, some document existed at some certain point in time. Or this is also, we will discuss this is also very scalable because you don't really need to put an hash for every document. You can aggregate thousands and thousands of documents into a Merkle tree, and you can just take the Merkle root and you timestamp the Merkle root, and so you're timestamping all your documents. This is not a disruptive, I mean, try to imagine every time you approach the client with your blockchain idea, and you go there and you replace the word blockchain with you can timestamp. I mean, it's not so disruptive, but it's legit. It's a legit use case. And then there is like what I call the Eternity Wall use case from the startup Eternity Wall. Now the service Eternity Wall doesn't exist anymore because they were acquired by Blockstream and they shut it down. But the thing was basically a place in which you went to write stuff, random stuff like a tweet, and write it on an operator, paying your fees, of course, and so there stays forever. Now, BSV scammers are taking this idea to the next level. They try to put the entire system on storage on a blockchain, which is a very stupid idea for a normal kind of storage, because the block space, the Bitcoin block space is very scarce and is going to become even more and more scarce and expensive and precious. So you don't waste the block space for storage. But for very specific things, it could be a use case. Like I really want to write, I want to spend millions to write a love sentence to my wife. I will spend my millions to do that, or to insult the leader of North Korea or whatever. And I will do that, and nobody will be able to delete it forever. This is a strange use case, but it is a use case nonetheless. So the thing is that what I just said is that it will be better in theory if people knew that blockchain is just about time, it's just about timing and nothing else. And what you can do with a blockchain is either to timestamp something or to prove the publication of something forever, nothing more. So blockchain is just a timing mechanism, not really a timestamping mechanism, but a proof of publication mechanism. So the interesting thing is that a few time ago, an archaeological discovery came out. For the ones of you who didn't raise your hand when I said time chain, this may be quite surprising. So there is this article by the author of this article. I was assuming I would have read his name from the presentation because I don't remember it, but the presentation is blurry. So this anonymous guy that I cannot credit for in this speech because I don't remember his name, but the article is great. In 2000, I think it was 2016 or something, basically he discovered that Satoshi Nakamoto actually did use the term time chain in the code and in the specification many times to describe what we actually refer to as a blockchain today. Satoshi Nakamoto, there is also a software here. There is a GitHub software, you can find it, which is time chain, which collects all the words of Satoshi Nakamoto from Bitcoin talk and the comment in the code base and everything. And if you search for the term blockchain, you find 0 results. There is some chain of block, but there is Satoshi Nakamoto never used the term blockchain. And if you search for the term time chain, it is used quite a lot in all the contexts that now we refer to as blockchain. So not only the blockchain is something which is needed mostly for timing, but the archaeological evidences suggest us that originally speaking, it's still working, yeah. Originally, the word that Satoshi chose in order to describe this was time chain. And since Bitcoin is a religious cult and we are devoted to the creator, we should be archaeologically correct and we should get back to the term. There was a lot of excitement when this discovery came out. Like the first was Nick Carter. Nick Carter found out the article and he said, "Can I believe I missed this? Time chain is Satoshi's original vision phrasing." And then he went on saying like, "It was never about the blocks. It was time. My God, if only we had known. I was about time all along." And so he started to mock the typical blockchain buzzwords. Like imagine using these when you talk with your clients, like enterprise time chain, what is your time chain strategy, and on and on and on. Yeah, people started to be excited, like Francis Pouillot rediscovered it again, and he was like, fuck blockchain, it's time chain now, bitches. Sorry, I'm very excited. So there was some kind of excitement about this, and then again also, yeah, Tour de Mister, etc. But then Peter. So why is Peter angry with this? Why does he think that it's a terrible idea to push the time chain narrative instead of the blockchain one? First of all, because Unix timestamp doesn't really mean much. So there is a time indication inside the blocks of the blockchain. There is a Unix time indication, but it's not really trustworthy. What is matter is the block sequence, but the actual Unix time that you can read there can be wrong by a factor of 2 hours, 3 hours. So it's not important what time is written in the block. It's important the sequence of the block. And the second reason Peter is upset. How much time do we have before the question?
Now, but I know your timestamp is now, but I'll give you another minute.
Yeah, thank you. So there is an important difference between timestamp and proof of existence. This is a difference I will going to explain better tomorrow in the meetup. So come to the meetup and I will try to explain better the difference between these two things. But basically the two things is that timestamping is something which is very, very easy to scale, very private. It's something very scalable, a good use case, but it doesn't really, is not really useful to make Bitcoin work. What is useful to make Bitcoin work is not to prove that the transaction was registered registered at some point in time, but to prove that no conflicting transaction was registered at the same point in time. So it's not a matter of time stamping. It's not a matter of proof of existence. It's a matter of proof of not existence, which is a little bit more subtle and not scalable and a fucking problem. So Peter thinks that the time chain meme can be used in order to confuse people between time stamping and proof of publication. So I'm going to close. This is the last slide, promise. Why is Peter wrong? I will go to the actual interesting things. I think that the time word in English is used a lot in order to indicate what Peter refers to as proof of publication. Like if I ask you how many times you did something and you answer once, twice, or 3 times, you're using times also to indicate the amount of time you did something. And if you think about the typical time travel, I also have a very thematic shirt here. Yeah, think about Doc Emmett Brown with the blackboard, and he's saying, Marty, we have to come back here in order to avoid beef to take the book about, the sport book. So when Doc starts to draw all that kind of timelines, like this timeline is diverging here, and now Biff Tannen is the mayor of Hill Valley. But if we delete this timeline, we go back. You can have a shitty version of this with Avengers Endgame, but it sucks. The real version is of course, Back to the Future movie. And these kind of things are exactly like the forks on a blockchain consensus. You have a linear combination of events, and then you have some forking because some unique event is conflicting between the two timelines, and you can abandon one timeline and get back to the original timeline where Biff Tannen is not the mayor of Hill Valley. So basically, it's I think the time word is very appropriate to indicate what blockchain do. There are a lot of other reasons why Peter is wrong. And you know that because the last point is checkmate Peter. But I don't have time, so I will make some kind of the digging in tomorrow in the meetup.
Big round of applause. And let's just do a show of hands. How many people actually got the Back to the Future reference? That's pretty impressive. I think that was Back to the Future 2, though.
It was the 2. And everybody else, please leave the room.
Yeah, seriously. All right, I think we have time for one question. Just remember, we have the Time Lord here, so who will take him on? Come on. Pa, you're here. You're awake. Come, my friend. Come on up. Nice hat.
First of all, we anticipated that we want to change the name of the conference. We even made a mistake at the t-shirts, at the bags. The blockchain is written with a mistake. But nobody can notice that, because you see it all the time. The question, I remember in 2016 we were sitting with you and defining my version of word blockchain, and you approving it to some extent. And at the end, the definition was that blockchain is the method, not even technology, of storage and synchronization of data between parties who do not trust each other. So something like that. Would you still approve this, or?
Not only I will approve, but with this revolution, if Bitcoiners switch to time chain, we can leave the term blockchain free finally. So I was an asshole. I mean, I always annoyed you about, no, this is not a blockchain, this is not a blockchain. But now everything can be a blockchain finally, because everything else is a time chain. So we are taking the time chain back, and everybody can use the blockchain how the fuck they want.
Okay, even to name the conference.
Yeah.